Winter Roses, Summer by fairytalelovr. Chapter 20. My House, My Rules. Daenerys was forcing herself to breathe in and out slowly through the pain. Isla helped soothe her onto a half-lying position on the bed. It's nothing to worry about. Just the baby moving about and your body starting to prepare for the birth. Of course I'm worried. Jon is going to take at least another fortnight to get back. The baby better wait as well. Isla smiled. Don't worry. There's nothing suggesting you won't have another moon to wait yet. And the pain? Practice pains. You're not even a little bit dilated, and your plug didn't come out. So the child is just being a brat. Probably missing daddy. Dorea came into the room then. Sorry, my lady. Isla, if you're done, you better go to the kitchens. Lord Benjen is asking me to come and get you. The housekeeper frowned. Regardless of their flirting, Benjen wouldn't have called her this openly. It had to have something to do with him being acting Lord Starling while Lord Jon was away. What is happening? Daenerys asked. Nothing Isla can't handle, my lady. I'm sure, but I don't like your reluctance. Tell me. Dany insisted. It's Lady Catelyn, my lady. Dorea confessed she is being difficult. Daenerys sat up and the handmaiden explained what was happening. Isla, help me down to the audience hall. Dorea, gather everyone. Ouch, Jon complained. He was sitting on a chair in the Stark pavilion, which now had a starling winter rose right next to the grey direwolf banner. They had retreated there after the excitement died down, so Jon could get cleaned up from the feast. I haven't even touched you, Alice said with a disapproving look, finally putting the cloth against the cut. Now you can whine. Men, she complained under her breath. You can fight battles and jump into fights with bigger, scarier men, but you can't handle cleaning your wounds. That stings, Jon muttered, looking down at his arm. The sword had barely grazed it, but the cut was long and made a wide red stain on his sleeve. So Ella had authoritatively told him to shut up and let her tend the wound. Poor you, the woman said ironically, making Ned chuckle. Robert did say something sensible for once. That was an incredibly stupid thing to do. I know, Jon said, blushing. I saw what he was going to do, and I couldn't let him kill Sir Loras just because he lost. That's preposterous. Something a true knight would say, Sir Barristan said, coming into the tent. I came to see if you were well, my lord. I am, thank you, Sir Barristan. Jon replied, wincing as Ella dabbed the ointment onto the wound. What possessed you to jump into the fight? Sir Barristan said. Jon sighed. I don't know. There's something about that man. When we were fighting, I felt like you'd done something truly horrible against me once. Like I had to defend my siblings. Like he would forget Sir Loras and go into the seats, and I had to shield Sansa and Arya from him. The adults in the room froze for a beat, and then Sir Barristan and Ned exchanged a look. Besides, Jon continued with a smile at his sister, Sansa asked me to not let Sir Gregor hurt Sir Loras. The Lord of Winterfell was shocked, terrified even, while the Kingsguard was amazed. It's a funny little world we live in, brother, Ned recalled saying to Benjen once. Funny indeed. How had Jon felt this connection? How had he felt like the mountain was a threat to his siblings, if he hadn't even been born when the sack of King's Landing took place? He was pulled from his reverie when Sir Barristan spoke again. Regardless of your reasoning, you showed some skill back there. I was just defending myself. Do you like sword fighting, my lord? Not really, Jon said with a shrug. I mean, I like sparring well enough, but I take no pleasure in hurting people. I can't think of a reason to enjoy killing anyone. Sir Barristan opened a nostalgic smile. You truly are your father's son, Lord Starling. Ned clenched his jaw, a pang of jealousy going through him, before he regretted it. Jon didn't think anything of the compliment, but the Northerner knew Sir Barristan was not referring to him. It stung to be reminded he was not Jon's real father, especially today, when he had so much cause to be proud. Catelyn could barely hold her irritation in at being summoned by the girl. Honestly, the gall of her! Benjen had left the kitchens when the handmaiden first came, obviously being told where to go. So now, Catelyn, Edmure and Robb followed the girl and the customary 2 guards, guarding Robb as Catelyn had never been offered a personal escort, and Edmure had brought so few men when their father had sent them off to guard the runaway Catelyn, that her brother had thought it best to station them to work at their doors overnight, rather than dog their steps during the day. The height of the red double doors indicated the importance of a great room, and Catelyn was amazed when she crossed the threshold. It was certainly the audience hall, for across the room there was an elevated dais, where there were 2 grand chairs. Benjen stood next to the Lord's empty chair, and Daenerys sat on the chair to the left. Isla to her side. Ghost stood guard in front of both chairs, clearly showing no one would threaten House Starling without dealing with him first. "Lady Catelyn," Daenerys called when the group had come before her, "I heard the food prepared in my kitchens displeases you. They are not healthy for a convalescing child. Mr. Vulcan has spoken to the cooks and given strict instructions for Lord Bran's recovery, and I'm assured they are following to the letter. And I don't think I need to remind you that, even that if it weren't the case, common courtesy dictates that you should never interfere with your host's household. Any grievances should have been addressed directly to me, or at least my housekeeper, before you invaded my kitchens and started sprouting orders. I am Lady Stark." "Are you?" Daenerys taunted. "The place of Lady Stark is in Winterfell, and if I'm not mistaken, you have been banished. You have even been banished from Lord Stark's side. But nevertheless, we are not in Winterfell. We are in the Midnight Fortress, and the Midnight Fortress is ruled by House Starling. I am Lady Starling, therefore, my house, my rules. You arrived here 3 moons ago, uninvited and unwelcome. Despite all the insults you have bestowed upon me, my husband, and our unborn child, I have allowed you to stay due to Lord Bran's condition, and I did so, against my husband's initial wishes, because I understood you were a concerned mother. But by interfering with my household and threatening to dismiss my servants for following my orders and not yours, you have now overstayed your already uneasy welcome. Lord Benjen will make boat arrangements, and you will leave in the morning. As your escort, Lord Edmure will leave with you." "Are you asking me to leave?" Catelyn asked, shocked. "No. I am banishing you from the Blessed Island and any Starling holdings. You will not return here regardless of who is sick and who isn't. You should go to bed early, though. First tide is at dawn." Stunned, Catelyn allowed the guards and Edmure to lead her out of the hall and back to her room. Jon and Ned made their way to the main pavilion, where the feast would take place once King Robert finally arrived. In Daenerys' absence, Jon almost glued Arya and Sansa to his side. Every single noble man and noble woman in the 7 kingdoms seemed to want to talk to him, to introduce themselves, to praise his bravery. And then they saw Sansa's and Arya's necklaces and inspected the pommel of Jon's sword more closely, and their interest doubled. Though the sword was half ruined after the small duel. Jon would need to ask Gendry to borrow the Red Keep's forge for a few moments to see if he could fix it before they left. "Well, you really did go out of your way to raise interest," Sam had joked when Jon complained about the state of his wife's gift. "You're right. I wouldn't have been able to do that by myself." "Oh, I could hardly believe it when I heard who you were." Jon turned around to see an elderly woman approaching. He frowned before he saw the golden flower motif on her and the girl standing next to her. "Lady Olenna, I presume?" Jon said. "Well, there goes my disguise. What gave it away, I wonder? The golden rose of Highgarden?" "Oh, don't bother answering, child. I forget myself sometimes. May I, as Dowager Lady Tyrell, present the compliments of my house to our hero?" "Of course, my lady. It was an honour to aid Sir Loras." "You, knights and your honour," Olenna said. "This is my granddaughter, the Lady Marjorie." "Thank you for saving my brother's life, Sir Jon," Marjorie said, smiling. "Nonsense.
I honestly didn't realise what I was doing until Sir Gregor was on his back.
This is not the place for modesty, Lord Starling, Lady Olenna said, though I can see why you would struggle. But enough of that. I find myself even more eager to establish a good alliance between our houses.
Thank you, Lady Olenna. I feel I return your sentiment.
And isn't Lady Starling in the capital?
Marjorie asked. I'm afraid not. I thought the voyage ill-advised for an expectant mother, so I left her in the Midnight Fortress.
He smiled falsely, all too aware of the movings of court. A woman never decided anything, only her husband. Well, my congratulations, Lord Starling, said Lady Olenna. My dates are getting muddled. I wasn't aware you had been married that long.
Just over 10 moons now.
John! Sansa jumped over, overly excited.
John chuckled. My sister, Lady Sansa. Might I introduce the Lady Olenna Tyrell and her granddaughter, Lady Marjorie?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Lady Olenna, Lady Marjorie. I forgot myself.
Quite all right, dear, Olenna said fondly. I must say that is a beautiful necklace you've got there.
Thank you, Lady Olenna, Sansa said, the picture of the proper lady. It was a gift from my brother. The Queen of Thorns smiled.
Every new thing I hear about you is a new wonder, Lord Starling. This winter diamond everybody seems to be talking about is indeed a beauty. I find myself more and more reasons to rejoice at a future alliance.
And what would a House of the Reach have to ally with a House of the North? Cersei asked. Sansa shrunk next to John, clutching his arm. Although he didn't falter. It was Lady Olenna who took over.
Well, I'm sure you are aware of the unique position of the Blessed Island, Your Grace. A trade deal between House Tyrell and House Starling is not a flight of fancy. It's beneficial for our houses, the Reach and the North.
I came to congratulate you, Sir John, Cersei said with clear displeasure. I'm sure your heroics today only helped your trade deal.
Be careful, dear, Olenna said with a smile. Your contempt is showing. Are you jealous he didn't bring you a fancy necklace?
The Queen passed her lips. My father has enough minds to please me.
If you say so. Olenna's smile grew. Cersei gave her a glare before walking away briskly. Come on, child, she called Sansa. I find myself hungry, and I'd love to get to know you better on the way there. I'm afraid if we wait for King Robert, we shall all die of starvation.
Sansa smiled as they left, and Marjorie stepped closer. The Queen seems very angry, though I think jealous should be a better word.
I can understand. A year ago I was a bastard set to marry and shame a former princess. Now I have a prominent house, and my first visit to the capital has been the cause of quite a stir.
An impressive man, Marjorie smiled, with an impressive prospect. Makes us wonder if House Stark didn't waste such a wonderful bachelor.
My fortune comes from the King's grace in allowing me to marry Lady Starling, and I'm not a Stark.
I'm sorry if I have given offence, my lord, as it wasn't my intention. I merely meant to say that I'm very intrigued by the North now. We often hear such horrible stories down here.
Of how we are unwashed barbarians? Marjorie chuckled.
Among other things. If it wouldn't be such an imposition, I would very much like to visit whenever it would please you and Lady Starling.
I'll be sure to tell my lady wife of your desire to meet. After our child comes, I'm sure Lady Starling would be pleased to receive you.
With a nod, John stepped away, going where his father seemed overwhelmed while talking to some very angry-looking men. The feast was nearly over. Most of the food had been served, wine had flown like a river, and everyone was in good spirits. Except Joffrey, who was already in a foul mood, when he came to invite Sansa to sit with him and got a scathing reply from John. Cersei hadn't shown up to the tourney, and had disappeared from the tourney grounds before the feast had even started, after Robert had yelled at her the night before. Sansa and Arya had long since tired of the festivities, so Ella went to take them home. And Ned left to escort them. So Jon and Sam were sitting in the Stark place of honour, surrounded by loud men who wanted a conversation with the newest knight. Jon was laughing at a particularly bad joke of one of them was telling, when he heard Sam whimper. Turning to his friend, he saw that he was trying to disappear into himself. Jon started to frown when a shadow fell over the table.
Lord Starling, came a grave, arrogant voice, I must offer my compliments.
Jon looked up at the man. He was tall and bald at the top of his head, trimming the hair on the side short. He was built like a true warrior, and his hands were rough from wielding a sword. His eyes were cruel and unforgiving. Jon didn't need to see the standing archer sewn onto his jerkin to know who he was.
"Lord Tarley, what a pleasure to make your acquaintance," he said, only to be polite. "Lady Tarley."
He stood up with a smile, kissing the back of her hand as courtesy demanded.
"You are as lovely as the many tales I have heard led me to imagine."
Melissa smiled, blushing prettily. "And you are as kind and brave as the many tales I heard led me to believe, Lord Starling. You are too kind to have given my son a position when he is so young."
"Oh, trust me, Lady Tarley, it was one of the best decisions I have ever made. Sam was a lifesaver. House Starling would be lost without him." "Why? Has he magically learned to wield a sword and saved you from a band of wildlings? I heard they are quite common in the north."
Sam whimpered again, and retreated further into himself. Jon clenched his jaw. Thankfully, he was hard-pressed to find a more odious man.
"Wielding a sword is not the only honourable way to live, my lord," says the boy who was just anointed a knight. "Tell me, Lord Tarley, if all men wielded swords, who would manage the fields? As a man from the Reach, I'm sure you will agree that the farmer is as needed as the soldier. Are we to compare the nobility to the rabble now?"
Jon wanted to challenge the man to a duel, only to shut him up.
"If you want an example in the nobility within the great houses, the late Lord John Arryn was no military man, and he was the second most powerful man in the kingdom for almost 2 decades. Are you comparing yourself to the king now, boy? Far from it." Jon laughed. "Very far. I am merely pointing out the best example we have that not all glory and fame lies in a sword."
Lord Tarley opened his mouth to argue, but his wife cut him off. "Very well said, Lord Starling. My Sam is a scholar, not a warrior."
"And what are you going to live on for the rest of your life?" Randall asked his son. "An income that can disappear any minute when your master gets tired of you? You'll never get a woman interested in you. No less because you will have nothing to leave for your sons."
Melissa frowned, clearly confused, but Jon cut in.
"You are mistaken, Lord Tarley. I know he has renounced his right to Hornhill."
Jon interrupted again, though he noticed how Lady Tarley was completely befuddled by the conversation.
"But I am the lord of a major house. I was planning on waiting on a more prosperous time, but the opportunity has presented itself. I just got the paperwork that the king recognises the creation of House Tarley of the Blessed Island, a minor house sworn to House Starling. Considering how fertile my land is, I dare say Sam will have enough riches to make a very good match."
Sam was so shocked he forgot he was cowering before his father, looking at Jon slack-jawed. Melissa seemed utterly confused, until a wave of clarity seemed to wash through her. "Sam never wanted to join the Night's Watch, did he?" she asked her husband in a low voice. "He was kicked out of his own home and threatened out of his birthright."
"My dear,"
Randall started, his voice also low, though dangerous. "No, my dears. We'll speak later," she said, almost in threat. "Lord Starling, I can never find enough words to thank you for what you have done for my son."
"None of this, my lady. Sam earned all of this. I would be truly lost without him organising all my households and deals."
Randall was apoplectic.
"A weak, fat pudding of a coward and a naive boy, lord. It's a wonder how Starling has made it this far."
He left, storming out of the pavilion, and leaving his wife to stare daggers at his back. Once Melissa had finally said her goodbyes to her son and left, Jon and Sam were left alone in their seats. "I'm sorry," Sam mumbled. He shouldn't have spoken about you like that. And you didn't need to invent all of that."
"I didn't invent anything, Sam. I meant every word of it. You earned your own house. Can you imagine me trying to organise the shipbuilding, the farming, the mining by myself? I'd go crazy before long. Not to mention all the trade deals you worked even before we discovered the mines. If we have half the money to invest in the mining business, instead of borrowing everything from the Iron Bank and drown in debts, it's greatly due to you."
"Wait, so I have my own house?"
"Yes. Though now I think about it, if you want to change your name, make a truly new house instead of a cadet branch, let me know. Tonight. My father said he'd sign the papers in the morning.
No, I don't care any for my father, but our ancestors didn't have anything to do with it.
All right. John reached for their goblets. A toast to the new Lord Tarley.
John sat in his father's study with a smile, watching as he stamped his seal on the documents. The grey direwolf of House Stark next to the yellow badge of his office.
I would prefer if you kept quiet on this one, Ned said, at least for a while longer. Why? It's not against the law, is it? No, but it is different. And you've been causing quite the stir already. If she gets wind of this, Cersei Lannister will start sprouting words of rebellion, and we don't need that. Fine, Jon agreed, however begrudgingly. Besides, if Daenerys carries a son, it won't matter. I know. I don't see why women are any less capable of inheriting than a man. Dany is as capable of being a lady of the keep as I am. We discuss our ideas together, and she does much more than just deal with the household. Bear Island has been ruled by a lady for some years now, and no one has a thing to say against it. So if Dany carries a daughter, that girl will be my heiress.
Ned smiled, amused. He had been shocked at first when Jon had approached him with the request for a royal decree on the succession of House Starling. To make it gender-blind primogeniture was a Dornish idea, not a Westerosi norm. Targaryens even went as far as putting brothers before daughters after the Dance of the Dragons. But, of course, Jon had to be his mother's son and fight for equality. Ned was certain that, if he had been given a chance to sit on the throne, Jon would make gender-blind primogeniture a law on all Westerosi inheritance, and Daenerys would only encourage him. Shaking himself out of his treasonous thoughts, Ned finished signing off the document.
I've written a letter to your uncle. Would you mind taking it? Of course not. Jon, don't read it.
The young man frowned.
Father, I wouldn't. I know, I'm sorry, Ned sighed. It's a private conversation, and I wouldn't trust a raven that went through the Grand Maester's hands. I'm sorry. I suppose the capital's making me into a distrustful person. As long as you don't grow too paranoid, Father, I suppose that is a good thing. There are many here you shouldn't trust.
Ned smiled, giving Jon the envelope and the rolls, and standing up to hug him.
I am proud of you, son. You cannot imagine how much.
Jon smiled, touched, but Ned noticed his hesitation.
What is it? I know it saddens you when I... Please, Father, I'm a man now. Just, if you please, I won't search for her. Just give me a name. Please.
Ned felt his heart shrink with pain. It had been years since Jon had last asked. He half expected him to insist when he had broken down after hearing Catelyn's odious confession. But he hadn't.
She would be very proud of you as well, son. Would? As in, she is dead?
Jon asked, and Ned nodded, and both their eyes filled with tears. The man decided to be as honest as he could.
She died in childbed. I barely made it there on time. A maid put you in my arms, and then she begged me to keep you safe. She died saying how much she loved you.
Jon bit his lip to keep from sobbing, but that didn't work for long, and Ned pulled him into a hug, wishing he could have spared his son this pain. With a handful of letters asking to buy jewellery with the winter diamond, Jon prepared to leave King's Landing happily. He would miss his father and sisters, and even Ella, but he was anxious to go home. He had had a last chance to talk to Sir Barristan just as he was preparing to get on his horse to leave, as the Queen had come to take Sansa and Arya on another stroll through the gardens.
I'll keep an eye on them for you, my lord, the knight said. Thank you, Sir Barristan, Jon said earnestly. Anything? I feel like I can trust you. So please, if anything happens, get them to me. I will. On my honour, I will.
So Jon got on his horse and led the way out. Cersei's constant glares had made him anxious enough, and following the urges from both his father and Arelos, Jon hired more guards, as well as a few hedge knights who had come to the tourney and wanted to swear fealty in exchange for a place to live. That was wonderful news, as his growing army needed high officers and commanders. But it also made the Lady Daenerys nearly uncomfortably full when you added the number of small folk joining their party. The stop in Dragonstone promised to be uncomfortable, and, not wanting to impose, Jon and Sam went alone on the boat, with only Rhaelos and a handful of guards. Stannis Baratheon was a short-tempered and bad-humoured man, as well as very defensive, but in the end he and Jon were able to strike a deal. In exchange for nickel and copper, which the mines had in abundance, Stannis would send his best ship captain, Sir Davos Seaworth, to help Jon build his fleet and train his sailors. The winds were kind, and the voyage up the narrow sea to the blessed island was easy. Sam wasn't sick this time around. Jon smiled as the midnight fortress appeared black against the clear blue sky as they came closer, the wind colder and much more pleasant than the stifling heat of the south. "Home, sweet home," he told Sam. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh, I love it. I really like this because it's Game of Thrones, but in such a happier way that there isn't even a war. It's just them living their lives and building good ones. I love that. Also, Jon completely smacking down Lord Randall Tarly and Melissa realising it and snapping back at him too. God, I love that. And one thing about Olenna and Marjorie, I like that Olenna and Marjorie aren't trying to push Marjorie on a flirty way towards Jon, because I've seen that kind of thing happen before in this kind of fic, and I don't like that. But I like that she's still involved, and I hope that she and Dany become friends, because I can't quite remember if they do or if they don't. And the way that Jon is building his land, and Sam has his house, boy, that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.